Welcome to our lesson on environment changes that affect populations. Our objectives for this lesson are: analyze and interpret data to provide evidence for the effects of resource availability on organisms and populations of organisms in an ecosystem. Develop a model to describe the cycling of matter and flow of energy among living and non-living parts of an ecosystem. Construct an argument supported by empirical evidence that changes to physical or biological components of an ecosystem affect populations. Let's start with a couple of definitions. A school of fish swimming together, a herd of deer grazing in a field, or a colony of ants working in an anthill. Each of these is a biological population. A population is a group of individuals of the same species that live in the same area and interact with each other. These individuals can breed with one another and share resources like food, water, and shelter. Understanding populations is important for ecologists because it helps them study how groups of organisms grow, change, and are affected by things like disease, predators, and environmental changes. By studying populations, we can learn how to better protect endangered species and manage our natural resources. An ecosystem is a network of biological and physical components that constantly interact. Some examples of physical components that affect changes to an ecosystem include temperature, sunlight, soil composition, and availability of resources like water and oxygen. Imagine what might happen to a forest area if the air temperature rises significantly above normal, rainfall becomes scarce, and high winds start to blow. This perfect storm is what the western part of the country experiences most every year when wildfires explode and consume thousands of acres of forest lands. Many of the animals that live in forest lose their shelters and food sources due to the changes in the physical components of that ecosystem. Animals that normally live in the forest might be displaced to residential areas and disrupt the ecosystem in that area. A forest-dwelling bear suddenly becomes a serious problem to a new ecosystem when the bear must root through people's garbage to find enough food to survive. Changes to biological components can also impact an ecosystem. These include disease, changes in predator-prey relationships, changes in the plant community, and the introduction of invasive species. Kudzu is a fast-growing vine that is an invasive species that can severely disrupt ecosystems. Because the vine grows so rapidly and aggressively, kudzu smothers native plants, stealing their sunlight, water, and nutrients. This can lead to those plants dying out and even becoming extinct. As kudzu takes over, the variety of plants and animals in the ecosystem decreases, weakening the food chain and making the chain vulnerable to other problems. Additionally, kudzu changes the soil by extracting nitrogen, making it hard for the native plants to grow. This invasive species can even damage things like buildings and power lines by growing over them. Overall, the introduction of kudzu has a devastating effect on an ecosystem, leading to less biodiversity, habitat degradation, and economic damage. Picture a forest food web where deer munch on lush native plants and in turn become a meal for hungry wolves. Now, picture kudzu, a super fast growing vine, invading this peaceful scene. Kudzu quickly blocks sunlight from reaching the native plants the deer rely on, leaving them with little to eat. As the deer population dwindles from lack of food, the wolves also suffer, facing a shortage of their main prey. This disruption ripples through the entire food web. For example, with fewer deer around, smaller animals like rabbits might thrive as they face less competition for any remaining food. But this could lead to an increased pressure on the plants the rabbits eat, causing further imbalances. Birds that depend on the diverse native plants for seeds and insects also lose their food sources and nesting sites. Essentially, kudzu throws the whole system out of whack. The vine reduces biodiversity, making the food web simpler and less stable. This can lead to dramatic changes in the overall animal populations. In the virtual lab you'll conduct in this topic, you'll add an organism to a fish tank that competes with the existing population in the tank, mainly a goldfish. You'll add algae to the tank, which changes the fish tank ecosystem by adding a new living organism. You'll see how this change impacts the environment by changing the quality of water in the tank. In the end, you'll investigate the interaction between the presence of algae and fish by studying the effects of the algae on the goldfish's rate of breathing. This lab highlights the importance of oxygen for respiration in aquatic life and investigates how changing water quality affects the health of fish and other organisms. The hands-on lab studies the impact of acid rain on the eggshells of a bird. In this activity, you'll see how changing the environmental factor of rainfall quality affects the physical structure of the eggs. This lab gives you insight into how the local inhabitants of an ecosystem can change dramatically when rain that is more acidic than normal falls over the area and potentially impacts the viability of eggs, the number of offspring born, and can lead to a ripple effect on the other animals that live in the ecosystem. A final thought for this topic of study. Environmental changes in an ecosystem always affects populations that live in that ecosystem.